Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into how William Wordsworth basically started a full-blown literary rebellion, one that permanently changed how we view nature, memory, and even our own minds. I am so excited to walk you through this incredible journey.
You know, Wordsworth fundamentally believed that poetry wasn't just about following these rigid classical rules. Instead, he called it the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, recollected in tranquility. Think about that for a second. It's essentially an early concept of mindfulness. He's telling us that art is really about processing deep, raw emotions when your mind is finally at peace, tapping into reflection to create something truly profound.
But to really understand his impact, we have to look at the stuffy 18th century norms he was fighting against. The Neoclassical tradition back then, well, it was all about elevated diction, artificial structures, and aristocratic figures. But Wordsworth, he completely flipped the table. His Romantic Revolution demanded ordinary language. He focused on humble subjects, and he highlighted raw, genuine human emotion way over high society pretense.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the Romantic Poetry Revolution, returning to Tintern Abbey, nature, memory, and identity, the mechanics of the masterpiece, and finally, Wordsworth's enduring modern legacy. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Romantic Poetry Revolution, Rewriting the Rulebook in the Preface to Lyrical Ballads.
So in his 1800 manifesto, Wordsworth championed a radically democratic approach to literature. He absolutely insisted on using the real language of men. He celebrated humble subjects, shepherds, farmers, outcasts, rather than those grand mythological heroes. He formalized his famous idea of emotion recollected in tranquility and argued that poetry actually has to serve as a moral guide. The crucial point here is that he wanted to make poetry accessible to everyone, insisting it should reflect everyday human experience and find absolute profundity in the lives of ordinary people.
Moving on to Section 2, Returning to Tintern Abbey, From Theory to Practice on the River Wye.
Now here's a really interesting fact. He didn't actually write this poem at the Abbey itself. He composed it completely mentally during a walking tour with his sister Dorothy, marking his return to the area after a 5-year absence. He literally built the lines entirely in his head while walking the river valley after 5 long summers and winters away. He only actually wrote it down when he finally arrived in Bristol.
This structure is brilliant because it perfectly illustrates the journey he created in his mind. Over exactly 186 lines, he moves us both chronologically and thematically. We start right off with the immediate sensory details of rolling waters in the introduction. Then we move through the healing power of memory and ascend into these deep spiritual revelations. After that, he tackles the evolution of the self through time, before wrapping up with a deeply personal address to Dorothy. It is just a masterful psychological progression mapped out entirely in thought.
Which brings us to Section 3, Nature, Memory, and Identity, the Psychological Journey of Consciousness.
Wordsworth maps out this sort of 3-step developmental escalator of consciousness here. First up, we have sensory joy. This is the physical, glad animal movements of his youth, where nature was really just a pure appetite. Second is emotional sustenance, where the memory of nature actually provides tranquil restoration when he's stuck in busy urban environments. And third is spiritual understanding, where he perceives this unifying spiritual force rolling through all things. This narrative clearly shows his progression from raw physical enthusiasm as a kid to a mature spiritual awareness that ends up anchoring his entire moral being.
He writes, "In lonely rooms and mid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them, in hours of weariness, sensations sweet." Notice how he frames his memories here. He's actively using them as a mental health preservation tool to fight against the weary weight and noisy din of city life. Long before modern therapy was a thing, Wordsworth recognized that remembering these beauteous forms was exactly how you protect and restore your own mind.
All right, Section 4, the mechanics of the masterpiece, pulling back the curtain on Tintern Abbey. Central to how this all works is his use of blank verse. This is unrhymed iambic pentameter used really flexibly to approximate natural conversational speech. And Wordsworth chose this form super deliberately. By varying the stress patterns, he makes the poem sound urgently conversational and deeply personal. It completely avoids those stuffy, artificial rhyme and couplets of the previous generation, but it still maintains this beautiful, meditative, poetic rhythm.
He was also incredibly strategic with his literary devices. He uses apostrophe, like his direct, emotionally intense address to the Sylvan Wye. He throws in oxymorons like aching joys to capture those really complex contradictions we all feel.
He uses metaphors, calling nature the anchor of my purest thoughts, and uses vivid personification to literally bring the waters to life. This shows exactly how he paired specific devices with ordinary language to elevate simple descriptions of a river valley into grand philosophical truths.
But it's really vital to note that this poem isn't just about solitary meditation. Look at the role of his sister, Dorothy. He addresses her directly in the final section, seeing his own former self reflected right there in her wild eyes. He prays that nature will lead her from joy to joy, and he genuinely hopes these shared memories will comfort her in future grief. He doesn't just isolate himself in the woods, he seamlessly weaves in human connection, essentially making his sister a living vessel for his own continued identity.
And finally, Section 5, Wordsworth's enduring modern legacy, finding solace in the modern world.
This brings us to the ultimate question the poem forces us to consider. How does memory shape our individual identity across time? Tintern Abbey demonstrates that memory is not just a passive way of looking backward. Not at all. It's an active, vital faculty that integrates our temporal existence. It takes who we were and turns it into life and food for who we are actively becoming. And that realization, that is the cornerstone of his enduring legacy. Tintern Abbey anticipates modern ecological consciousness. It pioneers the psychological understanding of the continuous self. It proves nature is a restorative, moral grounding force. Plus, it created a completely new model for the dramatic monologue, heavily influencing future heavyweights like T.S. Eliot. Wordsworth's literary rebellion laid the absolute groundwork for how modern environmental thinkers and psychologists view our relationship with the world around us today.
In our increasingly urbanized and digital age, Wordsworth's vision of finding solace, perspective, and tranquil restoration in nature remains profoundly essential. As we constantly navigate the din of our own complex, unintelligible modern world, Wordsworth leaves us with a really powerful challenge to ponder. So I'll leave you with this. What natural landscapes are you storing in your memory right now to sustain and restore your future self tomorrow?